So, Fresh and Fit got demonetized and kicked off the YouTube partner sharing program. Let me just start by throwing sand on the wake. They'll probably be back. I know, and I agree. Getting demonetized is really bad. It's bad for you, it's bad for your channel, it's bad for your pockets. But their channel at the time of recording is still on YouTube. Unlike Sneeko, their channel did not get deleted. And so when that is the case, there's always a high likelihood that behind the scenes, they're sending emails and having meetings, and they will probably return. While it's a nice little moment to go and point and laugh at two of the biggest idiots on the internet of the last few years, I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing that in this video. Instead, there's an element to their rise and what they represent that I want to focus on to make a greater point. So Fresh and Fit, I think, started in 2016 and blew up during the pandemic like a lot of new creators, yours truly included. And if I'm fair, they are probably the inception of the modern plague of alpha male podcasts. They spent most of the last 3 years kind of like streamlining that formula by being incredibly misogynistic when they weren't embarrassing themselves against anyone who wasn't drinking the red pill Kool-Aid. Like the one time they met with a woman that they didn't hire and pay to be a guest on their show, and she kind of made them look bad. But we all know Fresh and Fit. What I want to know more in the moment is, why were they demonetized now? Why wasn't it after misogynistic moment number 5 or misogynistic moment number 500,000? Why not after another red pill guy tried to fight a black woman on their podcast? Why not after numerous racist jokes about black women, Asian women, etc.? I'm trying to figure out what was it that triggered them finally getting any type of consequences for their awful rhetoric on their show. I've heard others say it's because they tried to illegally put in copyright claims on other channels, which will get you demonetized. I've heard people speculate it was their recent feud with Abba and Preach, where they acted like monkeys and I think did like Hitler salutes and shit. I honestly don't know, but I feel like whatever got them demonetized, it wasn't misogyny. Misogyny, that's okay. They got 1.5 million subs, though with far, far less views than their regular content, which is something I'm going to bring up later. They got that big and didn't get taken off the game until they crossed some specific line that we know wasn't spreading hatred of women. For 3 years, hatred of women was A-okay. And I want to dig into the full ramifications of what that means in like a broad spectrum and how it relates to my personal view on the red pill and combating the red pill. Many people often accuse me of always thinking that I'm right and never taking criticism, which is untrue. And as an example, I'm going to, in this moment, like represent and rethink some stances I've had in the past that I don't think hold up anymore, specifically on why the algorithm content works the way it works and why some content doesn't get the views and visibility that other content gets. So this is me directly responding to criticism from the video I released a couple of weeks ago regarding the left isn't helping men ongoing discourse. Specifically, I want to take back what I said about the algorithm being responsible for the proliferation of red pill content and why men's content from progressive or leftist voices don't have the same spread. I made it seem like the computer itself, knowing that this was viable content that leads to engagement, was purposefully overspreading this type of content and radicalizing lots of young men. That's not the most accurate situation. It isn't really the algorithm's fault because the algorithm is a reflection of the audience. It's always been that. And it's time to face some hard truths about who the audience for this type of content tends to be and what they really need to help themselves. So you know how a few years back, Facebook got into a lot of trouble because it was being accused of helping to radicalize lots of people on far-right message boards and Facebook groups by boosting negative posts and content, much of which contained obvious misinformation, which led to low-key probably the election of Donald Trump, a bunch of COVID denial and the January 6th uprising. Pretty much a lot of the awful shit that's been going on the last 10 years is partially due to the spread of misinformation and the polarization of Americans into ridiculous and dangerous ideologies. However, recent studies have somewhat absolved Facebook explicitly as the cause for that particular problem, YouTube as well. What recent studies have found is that certain content grows not because it's radicalizing and converting ostensibly normal and neutral people. Instead, the research seems to indicate that there's a population of people who are already predisposed to certain belief systems, and then they gravitate to certain content that supports that belief system. And then once they get to that content, then the algorithm begins to do its job of bubbling, filtering, and insulating them from any other type of content that might push them off the platform. This may be called a radicalization process, but the key thing to understand is that normal people aren't being radicalized from a benign and neutral position into a far right extreme one. It's people who are already pretty entrenched in a particular belief system that get further polarized by the algorithm, but they were there to begin with. Now, this means a lot of things, but for this video, it should pull into context how ridiculous it is to genuinely complain that the red pill is winning because the left isn't trying hard enough. This argument hinges on the idea that all these poor, vulnerable guys are just innocent little boys until the silver-tongued red pill podcasts come and mind control them into becoming raging misogynists. Again, so many of you, my viewers included, give us content creators far too much credit for what is happening out in the real world and why certain behaviors and ideologies are present in society. Nobody is a blank slate. Men and boys on the internet aren't fucking Eevee from Pokemon just waiting to see if the Pokemon trainer is going to use the red pill stone or the blue pill stone. It doesn't work like that. What the research is telling us is that if you're here watching this video, congrats. You did something well before getting here to open yourself up to what I have to say, or at least that's what the algorithm thinks about you based on your watch behavior. My content individually has not convinced or converted anyone into a different ideology that they weren't already somewhat interested in. And anyone that tells you that their content does this is full of shit. What all of us are doing as content creators is doing a form of education on these ideologies, but your presence here is voluntary. You have to be somewhat interested in this topic and open to it to even have the chance to see the video, to click on it in the first place. That is kind of how the algorithm works. The algorithm sees in you that you may fuck with this video, or for some of you, you just love to hate videos like this, and so you watch them for some type of weird need to feel alive by wasting your time watching content that makes you angry. I don't get that part of y'all out there. Fuck y'all. Feel free to not. You can click off the video. So the ugly truth is that when you say your little innocent baby friend started watching a bunch of Andrew Tate videos and started to change, you might want to consider that he maybe wasn't all that innocent to begin with. And I'm not talking about your friend being a little problematic or a shitty boyfriend, although those are bad things. I'm talking about your friend that has very much changed their personality suddenly after watching red pill content. Understand, there are so many things that have to happen prior to make that a possibility. The process of radicalization, according to research, does not start with your For You page on TikTok. As I've pointed out several times, the problems that men face around engaging with their emotions, living healthy, less destructive lives, and treating women in their lives better and with more respect is the result of a grooming process for how we, at least in the West, learn to understand masculinity and gender. And that process begins at 3 or 4 years old. Your widow friend didn't just discover Andrew Tate and then suddenly start thinking misogyny is a good idea. He's been engaging and witnessing misogyny since he was a child. It started the first time he was told he couldn't cry. It started the first time he heard "like a girl" used as a pejorative statement. The first time his emotions were weaponized against him because that's how girls act. If no one has been there in those early moments to counteract this type of grooming, or some other fortuitous life experience didn't break him out early, then that is when your friend began on this path to being a red pill guy. Now, plenty of men grow up with this same grooming, but don't go as far as the red pill. And there's a reason for that I'll get to later, but it needs to be understood that when it comes to appealing to boys and men, the red pill has a significant advantage in that it directly builds upon the mind state that young men already have. And leftist theories about these issues are at a severe advantage because they're starting from the exact opposite end of the spectrum where they're not very willing to go. The fact that Fresh and Fit just got demonetized, and probably temporarily, is an example of this. They were allowed to exist because according to the terms and conditions of YouTube, their behavior,
respect. One of the mandatory ingredients for respect, you guys want to know what it is? Fear.
Of losing.
Fear. Whether it's physical violence or of loss. But the point is that woman needs to be scared.
Was normal. And there was an abundance of prospective viewers who felt the same and in fact really enjoyed it. Around 1.5 million as of now. So I have to correct myself. It's not that the algorithm presents tons of red pill nonsense that radicalizes young men and boys. It's that there is an abundance of men and boys already online seeking regressive and misogynistic content to consume, and red pill grifters are there to collect. It's not a battle for the souls of young men. It's a gold rush. But it gets deeper than that. This is Jason Wilson. I've talked about him multiple times because he's kind of awesome and like a perfect example of why this "there are no good male role models" argument doesn't hold up to reality. Jason Wilson is straight, married, classically masculine. He's a karate black belt. He's been doing work around masculinity for years. And when you watch him, he's not talking about Marx or Hooks or Judith Butler. He doesn't use big $1 million words. He's just doing karate and having really powerful, meaningful conversations with his wife and children and working with young men and teaching emotional intelligence. I fucking love this dude. And there's nothing left-wing about him as far as I can tell.
What was masculinity first? Because I thought masculinity, the word itself, was a comprehensive definition of a man. All right? It's not. It's attributes. Harriet Tubman was masculine at one point. You understand what I'm saying? And so you're telling me that we've allowed an adjective to define what it means to be a man. One adjective. Women don't do that. Women never have let culture define them. They rebel. Like we were talking earlier, that the saying was a woman's place was in the kitchen. You rebelled against that and proved that that's a big lie. For men, we say, no, you're only masculine, and we don't rebel against that. And so my whole thing, when you think of black masculinity, so you're saying, because the word itself, the definition means attributes traditionally ascribed to men, such as strength, boldness, and aggression. So you're saying so you're not saying black masculine like black manhood. What we're saying is the attack on black aggression, strength, and boldness. All right. So we're not talking about manhood. So are you seeing a state of men being more milksop? Men who lack courage? Absolutely. Men who are very passive and passive aggressive? Absolutely. And that's because they don't understand truly what it means to be a man. They only understand what it means to be masculine or non-masculine.
And most of you talking about where are the male role models don't even know who he is. For another example, someone just put me on a podcast called The Art of Manliness. And holy shit, this podcast is a treasure trove of relatively traditional and simple yet deep advice and discussions about living a good, useful life as a masculine man without blaming women for every little thing or making women into perfect vessels of virtue. Tons of great stuff to be had there. And I know that they're not unique in what they're offering and are out there if you look for them. Like, seriously, for those of you that are like trying to get your widow friend out of the red pill, you probably shouldn't start with me, honestly. I'm not going to be the best starting point for someone that deep in. My manosphere videos, I think, are really good, and they're not like my most radically left videos, so they may be of some use, but they may be more amenable to Jason Wilson. They may be more amenable to the Art of Manliness podcast. They may be more amenable to Raven the Red Flag podcast. Shout out Smaller Podcast as another example of the same thing. You don't have to jump directly into gender theory in order to be a better man. There's way more room for you to go before you get to where I'm at. It's just keeping it a buck. But that said, I want to own another mistake. One of the last times I mentioned Jason Wilson, I made it seem like he was small compared to red pill guys. That's not the best way to make my point about his lack of visibility. Because Jason Wilson isn't invisible. Jason Wilson is huge. On Instagram, he has 800,000 followers. On Twitter, he has more followers than me and Fresh and Fit guys. He has been on The Breakfast Club. He has written multiple bestsellers. The Art of Manliness podcast has over 1 million subs on YouTube, and their podcast is in Spotify's 1% of most listened to podcast lists. These guys aren't small fries. They're fucking huge. But this begs a question. Why haven't you or your widow friend getting sucked into the red pill heard of these bigger figures. Why are you guys saying that there's nothing out there for men that isn't misogynistic when there's clearly huge figures out there showing you the opposite? Could it be because you aren't actually looking for it? Going back to the point about how the algorithm works, the ugly truth is that your friend didn't get sucked into Andrew Tate and the red pill because he was looking for advice on how to be a better man. Your widow friend got sucked into the red pill because he kind of hates women. Or at least that's what the algorithm figured out about him. And that's the reality of the situation. The algorithms hack our brains and read our tendencies. They pay attention to what we engage in and pay attention to what we ignore. It knows what we will consume and come back for, and it knows what we will discard. I know who Jason Wilson is because I've known him for years at this point, because my algorithms on Facebook or whatever fed him to me a long time ago because it knew I would respond to what he had to offer. I didn't know who Andrew Tate and Fresh and Fit were until y'all forced them into my feeds. And there's always going to be people in the comments being like, I don't know who these people are. Oh my God, you guys get a golden ticket. You are so lucky. I envy you. People really fail to understand that red pill incel types are a vast minority of people. Now, misogyny is running rampant in all men. That's patriarchy, all that good stuff. But the red pill motherfuckers, they're small. Like going back to Fresh and Fit's 1.5 million subscribers, if you go and look at the view count for a lot of their videos, none of them barely reach that amount. They're getting maybe 80, 100, 150,000 views per video. And this is because the boys and men that find themselves there at a low point in life will eventually get the fuck over it, grow up, and move on with their lives. They may still pay attention to laugh at the antics of these figures as the buffoons they are, but they will never really buy into the shit long term. They don't change their behavior based on it. This is the reason why shorts and clips of these red pill creators get so many views, but their actual long form content gets so much less. And it's not just me, the male feminist, saying this, it's other more normal men. Like, remember when Fresh and Fit went on Flagrant 2 podcast and Andrew Souls afterward didn't even want to put the episode out, and then Fresh and Fit tried the sales because they were so alpha and told the real truth about the red pill, and then Flagrant 2 showed the footage to an audience of relatively normal dudes who thought Fresh and Fit looked like a couple of clowns.
I didn't want to put the pod out.
Oh, you didn't want to put it out?
I told him, I was like, I don't want to put it out. You guys are gonna look bad. My beef isn't with podcasters. My beef is with like, institutions. Like I like talking shit about politicians. I like talking shit about like institutions. I like talking about big grandiose things that like the only way that you can combat it is with ideology. I'm not really beefing with other podcasts. So I said, yo, you guys are not gonna look good on this. I don't think we should put it out.
Yeah, because
they were like, put it out.
At least you gave him the option, though.
I don't feel like they came off that different on your episode than they do on their show every night.
Maybe,
right?
and maybe that's why.
No, but it's a different crowd, though.
Flagrant 2 aren't some progressive socialist leftist podcast. They aren't Behind the Bastards, but they are much, much bigger than any alpha male podcast will ever be because they're appealing to actual normal dudes, which is why they were embarrassed that they shared their platform with a bunch of incel red pill clowns. Your algorithm's endpoint is Andrew Tate. And it's funny because he also calls y'all losers in a lot of his content. But his main thing is shitting on women and a world that makes you feel like the loser you are, but also makes it seem like it's not your fault. Instead, he allows you for a moment to experience a world where you aren't the loser, where women are, and men who actually have functional relationships with women are just simps and soy boys, and you're the one that knows the secret truth about the world because you took the red pill, which I want to remind everyone, is a metaphor for estrogen created by two trans women from the movie Matrix. You all are so fucking stupid. I hate that I keep making videos about y'all. This revenge of the losers ethos is the reason why so much red pill content is labeled "Why Modern Women Fail." Feminist gets embarrassed by facts and logic. Loud girl gets destroyed when alpha male puts her in her place. That's what y'all are attracted to. Y'all aren't attracted to my shit. Y'all aren't even attracted to Jason Wilson shit. Why are we still having this conversation? The solution to your problems is you. You don't need my videos or Jordan Peterson's videos or even Jason Wilson's videos. The first thing you need is intention. And then after that, social support, personal development, education, probably hygiene, and if you're lucky, therapy to help you work through how you got to this point. You are not going to undo a lifetime of grooming under patriarchy with a few hours of YouTube videos. If I have helped any of you in any way, it's most likely because you at some point, whether subliminally or intentionally, decided to help yourself. And I know this because I've been there. Because my anger and frustration at engaging with this population is because I know exactly how many of you feel. I was also a loser who struggled socially and couldn't make sense of the opposite sex. As I've said before, if the red pill had existed in 2001, I'd have definitely fell into it for a point in time because I was misogynistic and bitter and entitled. And I thought I was a nice guy, but I wasn't. And I actually managed to get a few girlfriends and even get married before fully beginning to unpack the ways that patriarchy was causing me harm and contributing to the harm that I cause other people. And it was self-induced intentional growth over time, along with support and experiencing life, that helped me grow and change. And it definitely helped that there weren't algorithmically optimized bubbles on social media to keep me sucked into Red Pill podcasts. But there also wasn't BreadTube. There also wasn't Jason Wilson or positive masculinity content to help me out either. I had to do it on my own and with resources that I'll come back to in a second. The key, though, is that I admitted to my role in the equation and made it an active goal to grow and understand I'm still not done. All of this will be an ongoing process because, brace yourself, we live in a patriarchy. We live in a world where Fresh and Fit can shit on women all the way to the bank for 3 years and only get punished for something other than misogyny. To end, I return to the statement I made in that previous video to say that if you care about men and boys, your efforts and energy are best used to contribute to systemic and structural changes, along with providing as much social support as you can to the boys in your life and amplifying and engaging with the ideas and content that you think serves that purpose. As hard as I have worked to be the still very flawed man that I am today, so much of it is contingent on having access to education, healthcare, and a decent career, things that many boys and men who are vulnerable to the red pill do not have. Intention can only go so far without structural support. Don't try to debate your widow friend out of the red pill. He didn't get there due to strong arguments, and strong arguments are likely not going to lead him out. Instead, and I know this is going to sound bad to some of you, don't cut your red pill friend off. Show them unconditional love and support that doesn't hinge on them being the right type of men. Help them navigate a world they are struggling to make sense of and expose them to useful images and messages that they are actually ready for. You all are making me exhausted with this shit. The side channel was supposed to be goofy hot takes and pop culture, and that's what we'll be returning to as soon as possible. I'm FD Signifier, and this has been Lightwork.